Welcome everyone to today's episode. I was about to say special episode, but I feel like every episode is special, at least to me. But today is a new one in a way, because officially, Paul Townley, you're the first guest on the Treatment Room Secret podcast to return for the second time. So congratulations. Good to have you here again. Whoever doesn't know Paul Townley, number one, they can read about him online on our website, but also you can jump 11 episodes back to episode number 1, where you'll be able to listen to the first hour we recorded with Paul Townley. It was actually the kickoff episode for Treatment Room Secrets. And I think I mentioned last episode, I don't know if you listened, Paul, to my last episode number 11, I wasn't interviewing anyone. It was just me talking and almost, in a way, summarizing the first 10 episodes that we recorded. And I believe that I mentioned that I think the episode that I laughed at the most was the one with you. So again, congratulations within the first 2 minutes of the episode, but good to have you here. Very excited. I know we had a lot we wanted to talk about last time, and I believe we probably spent a good chunk of it talking about football and about Crystal Palace. So because of that, maybe let's start again with football and then jump to the more interesting things. Football, Chelsea. What's going on?
Do we have to?
At least you're not a Liverpool fan.
Well, first of all, I'm not too sure. Laughing at it, was it laughing at what I was saying, or because it was so awful? I hope it was what I was saying.
I think that you were able to hit spots in me that I absolutely resonate with.
That's probably because we both come from a football background, and let's be honest, you'll probably won a few more than Chelsea's doing at the moment. I don't want to talk about Chelsea; it makes me cry.
So many injuries, though, too.
It's unbelievable. We've got a team that's worth more than the GDP of Ghana at the moment, and we still can't do anything. And the injuries are gradually coming back. They're talking of bringing back the old Chelsea doctor that had a fallout with Jose Mourinho.
Is it the female doctor, right?
Yeah, there was something to do with what he said to her when she ran on the pitch or whatever. I can't remember, thinking of bringing her back. Actually, at the time, a good friend of mine was the physio. She was actually a doctor. She was a club doctor.
At Chelsea?
At Chelsea, yeah. And the actual physio was a guy called John Fern, who was a friend of mine that I'd worked with in a private clinic. After all of the kerfuffle that was caused by what was going on with Jose Mourinho and I think her name's Ava or something like that, he went elsewhere as well. So I don't really know who the physios are there now. They have had some pretty awful injury problems with Reece James and Mason Mount. But the main thing is it's just a real big mix-up. They can't get the team to get together. That's my...
Kante is injured too, isn't he?
He's always injured, isn't he?
Yeah, it seems like
for most of the season he has been, yeah.
But
he's just signed a contract as well. I don't know what they're thinking he's going to do.
Yeah, and I think there's a general consensus out there amongst football players, fans, and everyone that he was one of the most important players on the team that won a couple of championships.
Yeah, he was incredible, and he's still. I think that the sad thing is, I mean, obviously I'm talking as a fan of Chelsea. I worked at Crystal Palace, so I'm always, when I have those matches, I'm in a total dilemma. I always just want it to be a draw. But the last match, I actually wanted Chelsea to win because we're doing so badly at the moment. But our good older players, like the captain, whose name I can never say, that one, yeah, and Conte, and a few of the others that have been injured or they're just not able to manage the match time now. It's making a real big difference while the young ones are coming through, and they've brought so many. I mean, it's absolutely pure class what they've got on the playing ground at the moment whenever you watch a match, but they've not managed to gel yet because they're not there. And I used to see that a lot. It's funny. I remember it very well when I was at Crystal Palace. We had Terry Venables was the manager at the time, and Steve Coppell was been basically pushed to the side to be the director of football, and he had been the manager prior to that. And it was something I saw a lot in the treatment room was there was a changeover. Terry Venables wasn't really managing to do very much with the team he had, and he spent a lot of money. The chairman at the time had spent and invested a lot of money, brought in a lot of new players. It just wasn't working. I was working with a reserve team a lot. My position then, I was like the head of the academy, which I said in the first podcast.
Yep.
But my second hat, so to speak, was the second professional physio, and I used to do a lot of work with the reserve team.
Now it's like the U23s, I think they go by.
They might be. I mean, it was then. It was just the reserve teams, and basically that was the team that was made up of the players that weren't in favour at the time, or were injured, or coming back from injuries, or whatever. They wouldn't be playing if they were injured. Coming back for injuries on the way back in, and that lot were probably more, should I say, allied or linked to Steve Coppell at the time, who was no longer a manager. When Terry Venables got kicked out, basically it was amazing, because I'd never seen anything like that. I was fairly new to football at that point, but literally the faces of the players in the treatment room changed, because the lot that were there under Terry Venables suddenly knew they were not going to be picked for the matches, and the ones that were all on the reserve team suddenly knew they were going to be picked for the matches,
or at least have a chance,
or like have a very good chance, because Steve Coppell was now the manager. So and you could just see, like, there was like what had been one of all these happy faces on the left side suddenly became very dark and gloomy, and on the right side suddenly became very, very happy. And the team literally changed overnight. A lot of people were kicked out or whatever at that point as well. That was also about the time that we, Crystal Palace, went into administration for about the 14th time. I can't remember when, but how many. But there were some changes, and it was weird to watch it. And I'm looking at Chelsea now, and I'm thinking, what must be going on? It must be going through the minds of some of those players, especially some of the young, good players like Mason Mount, who, he's brilliant. I think he's an excellent player, but how must he be feeling? Because he's getting a lot of sort of bad press from the fans, and he's not been able to really fit in here and there. And so it's quite interesting to watch it, knowing the dynamic that's going on behind it to some extent.
So on the Mason Mount thing, and I think it's very analogous to many other players, for example, even Marcus Rashford, although they're on opposite sides of the spectrum at the moment, but the players have to perform consistently. Because if not, they get heat from the fans, they get heat from the media, and it must disturb them psychologically, mentally, and
definitely
just push them off the track.
If you think of somebody like Mason Mount, now he's a young player. He came through the academy, Chelsea through and through. He's got it stamped on his heart somewhere. He's been played out of position quite a lot of times, and then he's got injuries. I don't think people really understand just quite how often being played out of position can affect your having an injury. I mean, I can't remember what position you played in.
I was a centre-back.
I was going to say, you've got to have been a back at your height and build. So somebody starts making you play out on the wing, and you're not used to running at that speed or doing things like that, you're going to develop an injury in a certain way.
Yeah, suddenly I'll just be sprinting for longer distances and at a higher rate.
And if you're doing it match after match when you're not used to it and haven't really built up to it, you're likely to do a hamstring or pull a calf muscle.
That's something that people don't think about, even in, I know we're talking about elite Premier League players, but even if someone is not used to going to the park.
Well, that happens daily. That's my bread and butter, let's be honest.
But people don't really... Do people think about that, you think? Before they go out and play?
No, never. Never.
They just think it's...
I've got one now. He's a teacher. He's actually a teacher of cinema. And he said, I hadn't played for a while. And I said, well, what's a while? A couple of years. And he said, no, I went out and started playing with my friends in the park. The guy's in his 50s. Of course he's going to pull a calf muscle. And he did. And the thing is, this is what happened with the likes of Mason Mount. When they get injured and then they're out and then they're trying to get back in and getting injured again. As we said last time, that happens a lot. How many times you were pushed back into playing because you were needed. And then he's getting played out of position again. And he's never been able to really find himself. And then they come in and drop somebody else in. the big managers and the owners are all saying, right, I want to buy this, I want to buy that, I'm going to buy. We're talking as if we're talking about sweets, but it's not, or candies if you're American. It's not. These are human beings. They're buying them. They're putting them in. The manager
and tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah, or hundreds of millions even. The manager, Harry Potter, or whatever his name is, Graham Potter, I'm being a bit insulting there. He's certainly not done anything magical with Chelsea recently. He's got to try and gel this, which is almost impossible because he's just getting thrown in different bits. The older players are still trying to keep some of their spots. The younger players, like Mason Mount, like Reece James, who's coming back from injury, they're struggling and are not giving them the chance to really excel as we know that they can excel. And so what happens is they end up selling them, and I'm so scared they're going to do that. I'm terrified they're going to sell people like Mason Mount just to make some of the money back for people that won't necessarily fit in. And I saw it even at a bit of a lower level like Crystal Palace. I saw it quite a lot. And I was only there for a few years, and in a few years I was working there, a few seasons that I was working there, I saw it. And it's quite surprising to see it. And then when you take it down to the guy playing in the park or the guy playing for his local sort of five-a-side team that haven't played, and the mentality of that, I mean, no one likes to be left on the bench. And then they go in and try and do it and play and do what they can and give their all, which hasn't been used for quite a while, so to speak, and then end up getting injuries.
Yeah, and you get a bit warmed up, rattled up, and you feel invincible.
Exactly. And then what happens is okay, I haven't got the strength, I haven't got the power, I haven't got the fitness to manage and to play like I could.
Yeah.
What do? So you take somebody's legs out from under them because it's easier to hack them down than it is to
cheat.
Yeah, and than it is to actually try and play as well as you used to be able to play. So now you've got another injury sitting there. Okay, it bodes well for people like me, I suppose, but I don't always get to see them. I might go to another physio. But it's.
Do you find yourself as a physio and as someone who has worked in the back scenes of football, of soccer, do you find, and you are a fan today, do you find yourself though looking at football through a different lens?
Oh, totally. I can't watch a proper football match.
So if you sit next to a normal fan, then you think that you guys are watching two different things almost?
It's interesting. If I'm watching it on the TV, I've got two sons, and one's a 20-year-old and another's a 17-year-old. The 17-year-old is finishing school. His language is absolutely atrocious, I have to say, when he's watching a football match. He's learned every bad English word as possible from me. The older one's a little bit more laid back. And we're watching a match, and the thing is, when you're watching a TV, the camera is where the ball is. It's not on the player that just went down or the player that's possibly going to go down, and that's what I'm watching. And so you can watch the match on the TV, and I'll see the foul, and I'll say that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a problem for such and such thing. But I've only seen it in the sort of the framework of the TV. Now, if I'm at a live match, I'm not even watching the ball. I'm always looking behind it or in front of it, or looking for the brute that's going to hack the team or the player. If I go to a match, it's usually a team I support, but I want to see win. So I'm looking at what's going to be happening with the good players or particular position, or the known player for fouling. So you're looking at that from a completely different perspective, and often you're not actually seeing what's going on at the time of the match, and suddenly you hear ooh like that, and I'm already looking at somebody that's been cut down or been fouled further down to see if he's getting up, what leg he's favouring, what leg he isn't favouring, how he's moving or not moving. And like I said, when the match is flowing nicely, you're looking at, say for example, back in the day, and I'm just showing my age now, when I was working in football, there was a West Ham player called Julian Dix. I don't know if you remember him.
I don't.
You don't? I'll tell you, we had one in Crystal Palace called Kevin Muscat. And I remember when one of the players said, oh, he'd left the team already, he was at another team, and they said, oh, did you see what Muscat did, blah, 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 and some other player turned around and said, what, was he destroying somebody's knee or something? Because he was known for, like, really, for fouling, and Julian Dix was quite a hard player as well. Roy Keane, obviously you've heard of that, He's a very hard player. You'd be looking at players like that to see what they're going to be doing. As you well know, not everything happens on the ball.
And on frame, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that definitely people or the average fan doesn't really think about.
Never think of it.
Another thing about football and soccer is the game looks easy when viewed through the TV or from above in the stadium.
Yeah.
If you watch a game at the same height as the coach and players,
Thing,
it seems 100 times faster. It almost seems impossible to do anything on the ball. But the criticizers sit so high up. And the game, it does look easy. I don't blame them because it really does look easy. It seems like you can see everything. But once you're like on the same height level as all the players on the field, how the hell are you supposed to see?
You've two things. I'm going to ask you something about when you were a centre-back and corners in a second. So if I forget that, remember it. When they have their kit and they choose their kit, it goes down to that simple thing. The kit man lays all the kit out and everything.
Yeah.
If they don't get the socks right, they have to change the kit. And have you ever thought of why? Well, you probably know why. Because when you're playing football and the ball's moving and it's moving at speed. I worked in football, I worked in rugby, and I said before in the other podcast I worked with other international athletes. But in football, football, soccer, rugby and American football are both pretty aggressive and violent games. But football for injuries and nasty injuries, or soccer, is far, far worse simply because of the speed and the size of these guys. These are not small little people. These are very big guys. People just don't realise, like you said, you're not on the ground with them. If you looked at some of the players, I remember Tony Adams, the old Arsenal defender, opening the door for me. He held the top of the door open for me and I walked under his arm. That's how big they are. His quads were like the size of my chest. Something like that coming into you at speed is going to hurt. Now, I was going back, when you're playing football, somebody even having the socks a different colour, what are you doing when you're playing? You're not looking the guy in the eye. You're looking at his legs and his feet to see what he's doing. And you're moving at a fair pace. You're probably running 20 miles an hour if you're really sprinting. And somebody's coming up beside you. You want to know what colour socks they're wearing because they can be on your team or not. And you can't have two teams wearing the same colour socks because it's confusing. So that's one thing. Another thing people don't realise is just how much, and you must know this, you would have gone up for corners. You would have gone up for corners. How much niggle, as we call it, goes in for corners when you've got the people elbowing you in the ribs and giving you a little jab or scraping their studs down the back of your calf muscle just to put you off, or the little thumps here and there that you don't get. There's loads of them. People don't see it, but they hurt. You get thumped in the ribs, it hurts.
My first ever game as a officially an adult player, leaving the youth ranks. I came in as a substitute, really to waste time. It was about the 92nd or 93rd minute, and it was to defend a corner. So I was subbed in, and I ran to the 18-yard box, 16-meter box to defend. And as soon as I got there and found my man, which was a big guy, bigger than me, and I'm 6'2", so he's a big boy. And as soon I looked him in the eyes, and he grabbed my down there, my nutsack, and yeah, I froze for a second, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
And if that happened to me, obviously there's famous pictures of players from
like Gascoigne and Vinnie Jones picture.
Exactly.
Where he's doing
so that's exactly what happened to me, and it caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting it because I've experienced little elbows, little nudges, someone spitting on you, small things that are just annoying, but when someone grabs you down there, it's unexpected and very uncomfortable.
The funny,
and you don't have time to react because he grabs you and then the ball's played in,
and he's still holding you when you're trying to jump up.
No,
you're not going to jump up.
You're not going to try and jump up. Yeah.
Now, you're making me laugh thinking about it, because the amount of times I've run on to, how can we say, injuries of the nether regions. And that was, well, in my case, always seemed to happen on the other side of the pitch. I'm not the fastest thing on two legs. But you would run across there and the guy would be rolling around. And when you get there as a physio, there's nothing you can do. I mean, I can't put cold water on it because he's not going to say thank you if I pour ice cold water all over his shorts and everything. He's in pain everywhere. Anyway, everybody, including the ref, are all laughing. So that's all you hear is people laughing, including your own team from the benches, because they all know what it's like. They know what's happened.
Yeah.
They know what's going to go on. And you run up and you sort of say, well, "You're okay?" And he goes, "Of course I'm not." And he said,
Just need
"What can I do?"
Time.
They just sort of spray something and try and look useful, and then they'll get up and eventually start moving around.
So what would you tell people that don't know about the injury theatrics in football? This is obviously I don't think it came from the English football culture, more from South American, European, Spanish, definitely. Italians, right? Yeah. But is that something you experienced?
A lot.
Over theatrics?
I'll give you a good story of this. It was actually with the youth team, and I got one of my tours abroad. I didn't get many with the first team. I travelled, obviously, in the Premier League or the other, when we went down league, all around the country, because I was like the second physio. So I'd get quite a few matches and always the home games. But I got quite a few tours abroad with the kids coming through. And we had tours in Italy and in France and things like that. And Crystal Palace. Now, Crystal Palace is not one of these, or wasn't, still isn't really.
Have you seen Ted Lasso?
I've heard of it. No, I have never seen it.
So it's I believe it's AFC Richmond. Yeah. But the stadium, the colours. I'm sorry if I'm wrong here, but the colours are seems like it's based on Crystal Palace. So I think you'd enjoy it.
From what I've heard of it, he sounds like the youth team manager. I'm not going to say his name that we had, who was one shouting and screaming. And I've never actually seen it, but a friend of mine's told me about it. He said, "Why haven't you watched it? You must watch it." And he's doing this. And I'm listening to it and I'm thinking, that happened in our changing room. That was one of our youth team coaches that used to act just like that. So it could well be based on him. But I remember when we went and we had this match, I think it was in Italy. And lovely. We went to LaGuardia and they had all the little stadiums around there that we were playing in. And we'd be playing the youth team for Juventus, the youth team for Bayern Munich, the youth team for Ajax and things like that. It was great. We had a good time while we were there as well with the other coaches and the physios. But I just remember that Crystal Palace were one of these teams that they would... Because you're talking about that Ted Lasso, be a man, don't let him knock you off the ball, you knock him off the ball, be tough. So the kids were kind of taught to be like that. And suddenly they came up against some of the Italian teams like Juventus and who were diving a lot or throwing themselves around on the floor, or Barcelona, again, throwing themselves around on the floor. And the kids would come up and they would go, "I can't get to the ball because they keep, every time I go anywhere near them, they throw themselves on the floor and we've not even touched it." And coach turned around, the coach at the time, he turned around and said, "You're just going to have to get used to it." He said, "That's how they play. And get used to it. And it's going to happen if you get through into the senior teams. You just have to get used to it. You find your way of dealing with it." And you do. You'll see some of the ones that will just come... What I've seen more often is they give them a little dig with their heel as they go past. You want to play around on the floor, make sure you feel it for the next few minutes. But
yeah, maybe they have to catch them off frame because also the referees can see so much as well.
And the ball's already moving by that point.
So they almost found a solution for the tough English player, just fall over every time. But for Americans, for example, or even I think rugby fans or people in the rugby world, they must hate when, a football player like a Neymar gets touched and rolls over. It's more than diving because even when it is a foul, they just overplay it.
Yeah, it gets on your nerves.
The rolling over, the screaming, it almost looks like they just got shot.
Yeah.
But then 2 seconds later, they're on their
feet.
Up on their feet. Everything's fine.
I go... my wife used to work for United Airlines, so I'm blessed with the benefit of having standby tickets. I'm also blessed with two kids who absolutely love to travel whenever they can, and knowing that they're not easily going to get to see Chelsea in Britain. Every summer, Chelsea seems to play in the United States in these different trophies. The last one was the Florida Cup. It's actually really disappointing because it kind of sets the stage, honestly, for the season. This year we were playing Arsenal in Orlando, and we went over to see the match.
The North London Derby in Florida.
Well, yeah, Northwest London in Florida, in a Florida State Cup. And Arsenal beat us 4-0. And where are Arsenal now? Top of the league. And where are Chelsea now? Hovering around mid-table. It kind of set the scene for it almost. But when they started diving around, a lot of the fans obviously were American. So it was actually joy sitting there talking to her and everything. I could hear our accents and I'd say, "Oh, you're English." I said, "Yeah, we've come over to watch the match and everything." And they were talking, "Why is he doing that?" They couldn't stand it. It used to really annoy them because American football, they're not really like that either. They're American soccer that I've seen, the players that were at Chelsea, they're not sort of make a meal out of nothing. Everyone will dive. We all do. I don't because I've never played it, but they're all going to dive. They're all going to try and get a bit here and there. They're all going to have a little dig here and there. But there are, like you say, certain teams that are a lot more, or certain cultures that are a lot more willing to stand up and take it and just move on. The old Norman Hunter with the bandage around his head with loads of blood coming out of it and that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm going to carry on playing.
It used to be noble in the sport.
There was a story, but there were, I mean, this is before my time even. I remember them. I was a kid. Norman Hunter from Leeds and Jimmy Greaves, I think he was at Spurs or whatever. And they're standing in a tunnel and Jimmy Greaves is telling his story. And Jimmy Greaves, they're standing in a tunnel ready to come out. And suddenly he feels this searing pain down the back of his leg. And Norman Hunter was dragging his studs down the back of his calf muscle and his leg. And Jimmy Greaves turned around and said, "How are you doing?" Probably used a few other words from that. And Norman Hunter went, "Get used to that. You've got another 90 minutes of it coming."
What a way to start the game, huh?
He said, and that was it. He said, "For the rest of the match, he was cutting chunks out of me with his tackles."
So now fast forward a few decades, you have the media, you have the managers and the top physios and club doctors all arguing that they should reduce the number of games or matches that players play because of the number of injuries. And obviously medicine is improving, but at the same time, number of injuries, they say, keeps growing as well. What do you think about reducing the number of games?
Well, firstly, I think they're playing a lot more games than they ever did.
Yeah, because there's more competitions.
And
the tours in America, etc.
Exactly. Let's take this year. We had, if you're a Chelsea player, I'm sorry for the audience for us banging on about Chelsea all the time, but it's a good example.
That's all right. Everyone likes the Premier League.
Because they're a fairly high-level team and they've got players from all over the world. So this year they would have finished the Premier League as they did. We weren't so far down the table. We were at third or fourth, weren't we? Something I can't remember now. Straight after that, they'd had a little bit of time off, but quite a lot of them were going on to the sort of the matches abroad, which are technically friendlies, but they're not really that friendly. When you've got Arsenal against Chelsea, they're feeling each other's, sort of gauging each other's depth and ability and seeing what they can get away with regards to a foul here and there. So as a physio, you
and also players trying to prove themselves.
Yeah, and prove themselves exactly. And then they went into the World Cup. They weren't getting much time off. That's an awful lot of matches, especially if you've been playing in the Champions League, the FA Cup and things like that. Take the matches way back when so at the time I was talking about in the 60s, 70s or whatever, that it was a more vigorous, brutal game. But the level of fitness and what was expected of a player was just not the same. And the amount of damage that they do, these guys are extremely fast, strong, fit, healthy athletes, and they're playing. You have to slow it down at some point to give them some time off, and they don't get time off if they're at the top level. Somebody like Pele, rest in peace, who was in, everybody will accept him, George Best, and they're brilliant players that had to play in a hard level game. But if that viciousness that was in that game was around today, on top of the amount of physical demand that is expected from Premiership players and the like, it would be impossible. So in some ways it's changed from being brutal to being more sort of scientific. No football team at a high level worth its salt does not have a handful of fitness trainers, a handful of fitness coaches, psychology coaches, coaches in different ways that you know yourself. The medical system is obviously much more advanced, but at the same time, there's only so much a human body can take and heal, and it has to heal at a certain rate as well. And the demands on it are going to be a lot more for a footballer or a rugby player or whatever. So I think, to some extent, players are playing a lot more matches, and there could be a good argument for it to be reduced a little bit.
My take on that, though, if I have to play devil's advocate to the whole movement behind reducing the number of games, or at least changing the schedule, this is another argument, changing the schedule to allow more rest between games, which seems very difficult where they're trying to throw in all these tournaments and competitions and World Cup changes, all these things into one season. Chelsea have so many players.
Exactly, I was thinking.
The managers decide, because they want to play with the players that are always in form, they choose to overplay the best players.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah.
And the other thing, but it's not always just that they're because they're in good form, is that it's, again, the thing with Chelsea at the moment, he's having a problem trying to figure out how to play his players. Once he's found the formula that works, that the other teams haven't got used to yet,
he'll stick
to it as much as he can and play those players in those positions as much as he can, which is going to lead to injuries. The problem is he's up against the demands of the amount of games, how often, how much they're playing, where they're playing. Don't forget these Champions League matches involve people travelling all over the world, all over Europe and things like that, or even friendlies now all over the world. Okay, they get a little bit of rest in between, but they're usually having to train the next day or whatever, and whatever. So they are picking up injuries. There is quite a lot. So there's a for and against. Also, people are paying a lot of money for these matches, so they should expect to be able to go and see them as much as they can.
Yeah.
So there is a for and against. I do think they do play an awful lot of matches, but there is a lot of teams with the depth to be able to manage that. It's up to the manager how he deals with that. On the other side of it, there are some of the other teams that don't have that depth, and once they get the injuries, it's really a problem for them to be able to field the team that they want.
And that's a good argument, because not all teams have the depth.
Yeah. Chelsea's got, like I said, the equivalent of the GDP of Ghana playing in the middle. They can't seem to pass a ball to each other, granted, but there's hundreds of them. The team bus is now triple-decker, or at least 4 airplanes long.
And they have dozens of players on loan, top players on loan. Yeah.
And they've got
just in case.
But Brentford hasn't.
Yeah.
Brighton hasn't.
Do you see a world where they manage to control the injuries that the players face because they're investing more into fitness coaches and physios and sports scientists and trying to throw science at this, understanding how much players should train, how many sprints they should do in training, at what speed, how much distance should they cover in games, when should they get rest? But it seems like with all that, players, it's just so unpredictable.
It doesn't look like it, does it? I mean, we've got these players with everything that you're saying. I kind of liken it to, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm not a football pundit, and please don't think I am. I'm a physio, but just happen to like football. I'm talking to an ex-football player. I liken it to like a motorway, and they put an extra lane in to take up the cars and everything, but in a very short amount of time, it's just as busy as it always was. It's equally the same with football. They put in all these different things to make them fitter, stronger, healthier, but the game improves at the same rate, and so the human body is still going to get injured at pretty much the same rate, maybe for different reasons. I wonder if that's what if that's what's causing it, because certainly injuries don't seem to be any different. Maybe because of the media, how much it puts on it, how much it talks about them, you know.
But no one is immune. The best players, the strongest players, the fittest players, it catches everyone by surprise.
Oh yeah, for sure. It brings us back to what we were saying about the little things that people don't see off the ball. I don't know if I mentioned it maybe in the last podcast, but when Terry Venables was the manager, his assistant manager was a guy called Terry Fenwick. And Terry Fenwick, if anybody remembers the '86 World Cup, and I'm still old enough to remember that,
that's Maradona's World Cup.
Exactly that World Cup, that match, when Maradona did the hand of God thing. Just after that, he did a bit where a beautiful goal where he ran from basically his box or his round the whole length of the pitch, and he popped the ball round somebody in what they call a nutmeg, where he passed it one side and ran round the other side, took the ball and scored a goal. That guy was a guy called Terry Fenwick, lovely chap. He actually ended up working in the Caribbean as a manager in one of the Caribbean teams. But he really nice chap, very strong player. Known for being a very strong player. Even to the day when I was working in football, which was sort of 99, he still couldn't walk into a pub without somebody reminding him of what happened in 1986 with the ball with Maradona. But he was telling me that he went to play and Bobby Robson was the manager and said, "Will you stop Maradona, for God's sake? Take him out or something." So Fenwick ran up, was standing there, and they were standing waiting for a throw-in, and he smashed his elbow into Maradona's chest. Now, that's not anything anybody ever sees on the TV. Terry Fenwick said Maradona was so strong and fit that his arm just went dead. He said, for the rest of the match, I couldn't move my arm, and Maradona just laughed at him and more or less said, is that all you've got? And Fenwick couldn't move. Now, if you can imagine, that's still happening. You said, people grabbing you here or punching you there or sticking in, and so those injuries are still there. They're the things that take you out of a game. And then coming back from it too early and trying to favour a leg in a particular way or a movement in a particular way and then pulling a hamstring, or like I said, being played out of position, that's not really going to make up for major differences in how you're being trained. I saw in one of the podcasts you had a podiatrist on, and I was only listening to a bit of it, but I know that I'll give you an example of how training differently or being played out of position can affect you. When I was working, I had my own sports injury clinic. We had a guy come in, and he'd was complaining about. No, actually, it was a course I was on. I'm telling a lie there. It was a course I was on, and someone was explaining to me. This guy had come in, and he developed these pains in his leg from running. Now, what had happened was he used to run 10 miles training for a marathon from A to B, but then he moved house and he moved to B, so he'd do the 10-mile run but from B to A, and he started developing a problem in his ankle and his around his shins. What happened was that they went and looked at the route, and basically the route he was running, when it was from A to B, it was like the road was like at a bit of a camber in that direction. But coming back, it would be in that direction. It completely changed his gait pattern, and he developed shin splints and then a stress fracture as a result of it. That's how it can be, like if you're being played out of position and you're suddenly expected to favour your right foot or your left foot in a different way. It might even just be turning.
You're cutting more on your left side than you were used to.
Exactly. Yeah. And that would develop. Now, any amount, unless you're going to train into that, that's great. But they're not being trained into that, being trained in for their fitness or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I don't see it's ever really going to change. No, I think it's going to. So I think the demands are just going to go up.
Probably. Because the game, it seems like it's going on a trend of the intensity keeps getting higher. Although the game is getting cleaner, because of VAR and all these
They have
things.
a bit more time to rest in a match.
Yes, but they say the distances the players cover is growing every year, and the number of sprints and the speed and all these different metrics are keep going and getting higher and higher. And as a result, the players are just unable to withstand the expectation of performing every single game.
Think of VAR now. It's like a double-edged sword. That in the World Cup, they were playing about 15 minutes extra every match.
Yeah.
But that's 15 minutes of running around and sweating that they weren't playing before. That's a lot.
And the demands on the players.
It's a third of a half.
Yeah.
You know? And to keep running and expect somebody to run at that pace. And that's just as many. How many fouls can happen in a 15-minute period? You look at a nice little box. That fouls are the ones that they actually got given a foul for, not for the amount of times they got kicked after later. Those kicks and digs are still happening at the same rate for that 15 minutes. In fact, I would say they're probably happening more because in the later 15 minutes they're more tired. So the chance of somebody being hacked down because somebody can't keep up with them is much greater. And as a therapist, you're going to have to deal with that.
And even if you don't get kicked down, it's the fatigue, right? When you're fatigued and then you try and push and sprint and cut, that's when you also make decisions that you probably shouldn't be making. I want to move away a little bit from football, but if we're looking at the school teacher who plays football in the park, gets injured, you wanted to talk a bit about your approach to really assessing someone, treating someone, rehabbing someone so that they can get back to their status quo.
Yeah.
So tell me.
Well, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here because I'm not. Any therapist, doesn't matter, osteopath, chiropractor, sports therapist, physiotherapist, massage therapist, they go through a lot of studying and learning and learning how to identify problems. And it comes down to the assessment. Somebody will come in, you will carry out a subjective assessment, you will ask them questions, and then you will try and treat them. You will do an objective assessment where you will look at them and try and decide what the problem is. Once upon a time, it would be very nice to turn around. It wasn't very nice. It was the way it was done. Was you would have a pathology that would describe a problem like tennis elbow or an ankle sprain. Let's take an ankle sprain. We've spoken about it before, but an ankle sprain is quite a common sort of injury, where it's not really differed. I think everybody was probably doing it. It was just that I've tried to make it for myself. When I did my master's, I was on a workshop, and somebody was just talking about sort of how to address things, and I kind of built it up a little bit, and for myself and my students, just to make things clearer. Because, say for example, somebody comes in with a tennis elbow, or somebody comes in with a neck pain or a knee pain. It's very easy to sort of give this test and that test. I'm just trying to think of probably the best description, best one to try and be a good example for this. And I always fall back on the ankle because it's easier. Say for example, somebody comes in with a sprained ankle. They've gone over on their ankle in a football match, and saying they're running in the park. They've sprained their ankle. Now, the obvious thing is to say it's an ankle sprain, the ligament is torn, it will act like that. There will be like edema and swelling and bruising. And obviously, it's pretty obvious that they've strained the ligaments, and you're going to treat accordingly. And that treatment will be like you would do the initial sort of first aid sort of thing, try and get the inflammation down. And then you will move on to the sort of rehab stage once you've cleared that up, and you know that the joint is stable. And you'll go on to the rehab stage where you will then try and get the patient to be able to return to sport, strengthen the offending ankle, get the proprioception or the body awareness over the ankle to work, because you don't want somebody going into football or running again on uneven surfaces. If they can't control that movement, it could take them out again. So now that's not changing at all. But sometimes, especially if it's gone down the line a little way, or even if it's not, even in the early stages, you should really be looking at what we do in a course for an NAT is the sort of structure, or I call it the SC SCMC, which is the structure. What structure is causing the problem? Why is it being caused? So that's the structure, the cause of the structure, the mechanism of injury, and any contributing factors. And sometimes what happens is people will look at it more like contributing factors first. Now, contributing factor could be somebody that's come in with a scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, or one leg shorter than the other. And they'll turn around and say, oh yeah, you've got this and you've got that. And the patient will go, oh yeah, I've got a scoliosis, and they seem quite proud of it, or I've got this, I've got that. But the fact is they've had that scoliosis all their life. That isn't really the cause of something that happened 3 weeks ago when you twisted your ankle and then it carried on. It's a contributing factor. It may be involved in it. But what else is involved in it? What's really doing it? And that's my kind of approach. I'm not trying to teach a granny to suck eggs or
no, of course.
Expression.
Yeah. But you try, like, it's important for you to find the root cause.
Yeah, I'm trying to differentiate which things, because invariably it's not one. Come back to the ankle. This guy's come in, he's got a twisted ankle. Okay, we know the ligament's lightly, so I look at it and say, okay, there's a joint aspect there, the ligament. The joint itself might be damaged, there may be a chip in the bone. I've got to look at it. Why is it causing it? The cause of it. Is there any sort of disc problem? Well, no, because there's no discs in the ankle. Osteogenic, yes, there is a bony element. There could be a chip in it. It could be an trigonum. Is there any neural damage? When I say neural damage, I don't mean as in neurology like that. I do mean it like neurogenic, as in the nerves in the area are not working optimally, or they're actually damaged and causing pain. Is there an affective component, a psychosocial component? Now, I'm not a psychologist, and I never will be. I've not got the social skills to be a psychologist. But I can realise that people have come in and said, oh yeah, and I hear it in my clinic all the time. People start talking to each other. You've got one of those. I had one of those. You've got this. My family, I've got a cousin who had this and told me you've got to do that, have this test. And the guy, by the time he's got into the clinic, he wants a CT, he wants this, he wants that, all from what he's heard from outside. Before he just thought he had a sprained ankle. Now he just thinks he's actually going to get married to royalty or something like that with what's going on. So there's all these different elements, and they impinge. Why are they impinging? Why is the ligament acting the way it is? Why is the muscle acting the way it is? Why is the tendon acting the way it is? Has it been strained? Is it in a particular pain mechanism mode? And there's different pain mechanism modes. You can talk about like a inflammatory nociceptive, which is the irritation of the nociceptors inside the soft tissue. It could be an inflammatory, it could be an ischemic component, it could be a mechanical component.
Do you think
causing the pain?
But do you think that physios or therapists out there, or even doctors, are afraid to kind of open that can of worms to try and figure out what are the contributing factors to this specific pain symptom? Because it could be like they could be putting this challenge on themselves that they might not find an answer for.
No, because in fact, what they're doing is that if you go down it, you said contributing factors, which can be a bit misleading, because then they will turn around. You could say, okay, you've got a particular pain mechanism working. Like I said, it could be neural, it could be something else. There could be something that could be contributing to it, but that's at the bottom of the pile. Often doctors will turn around and say, you've got a pathology, like a scoliosis, or you've got this, or you've got that. And they are putting themselves in that position that they really can't help. Because you can't. There aren't certain ways, and if you get it early enough with Schroth techniques and things like that, you can fix a scoliosis. But if I walked in with a bad back and somebody says to me, you've got a scoliosis, well, yeah, I know, I've had it for about 30 years. I'm not going to change it. So don't tell me about it. I didn't have pain 3 weeks ago. I've got a pain now. What happened that caused that pain? What structures are now playing up? Is it a disc? If I'm talking about a back, for example, is it a disc? Is it the joints? Is it the neural tissue around it? If I look at that, I can then adjust my treatments accordingly. So I'll come back, leave the ankle, we'll come back to the back. I go in, I've got a scoliosis. I'm a very slim, Delph-like human being. I shouldn't have any problems at all. But obviously I've got a lot of problems, and I've got hundreds of them. And obviously those contributing factors may affect me having a bad back. But what flared up, what started causing me the pain
Today
or 2 days ago, was it muscle tissue? Was it that I bent forward and I didn't do it properly, and I started off an inflammatory process around the facet joints where the neural tissue comes out, and the muscles went into spasm as a result? Okay, now I've just given you 3 there. There's a joint aspect, my facet joints, because I could have moved and strained a ligament. I could have set off the neural tissue because the inflammation that's caused by that is irritating the nerve roots and the nerves as they come out of the spine. That's causing muscle spasms, and that could be causing trigger points. That is going to cause me to act in a particular way. It could have an effective mechanism, and so I need to sort of give them enough information so people understand. But I can, as a therapist, now I'm lucky, as I've said this before, I'm a physiotherapist, so I'm pretty much allowed, like chiropractors or osteopaths, to deal with everything. A massage therapist may not be allowed to do things like manipulating joints or things like that according to their state legislature, say that word, or they're just not qualified to do it. But I can address looking at the joint. I can do things like trying to stabilise the joint with exercise or mobilise the joint where it's not moving. There was a good course I went on, which was muscle imbalance, but the teacher himself kind of said, well, the thing to look at is that you want to mobilise the restriction and stabilise the give. So there'll be certain areas that are over-mobile, and I want to stabilise those with exercise. But there may be an area that isn't so mobile, it's causing problems, because the muscles will act or the nerves will act accordingly. So I might want to release those with manipulation. Now I'm talking joints. Then coming to the muscle tissue, same sort of thing. There could be trigger points formed or tightness in the muscle tissue. So I want to release that. So I may use dry needling techniques or trigger point techniques of various types. They're all very, very useful. There may be a neural element. There's inflammation around the facet joint. You've got a nerve coming out of the facet joint that's irritating the neural tissue. What do I want to do with the nerve? Well, there's 2 things. I'd like to calm it down. So that might use electrotherapy like TENS or interferential or something like that, or massage, because that can have an effect as well, as it does on trigger points. And then I can try and mobilise the nerve, because the nerve is how can I say it? It's like a big pipe, like a tube, like a hose in a garden that's got stuck between 2 rocks or something like that. The sort of juice inside the nerve that's flying up and down the axoplasm.
And is that a nerve impingement?
It could be. That's how it would be called. It could be called, but it's usually the fact that you've got a nerve that's trying to move between an interface, whether it be muscle or joint. That the muscle might be tight because of trigger points or because it's guarding, that doesn't let the nerve move as well as it can. So the nerve isn't as mobile, it's not able to slide and glide. The axoplasm inside isn't allowed to flow, which stops the nerve working optimally. That makes the nerve produce ion channels at different points along its length at the wrong place that make it very sort of sensitive, and that generates pain, which feeds into the muscle tissue, which is now going to try and guard even more and maybe develop trigger points or tight muscle tissue, which could stop the joints around it moving. And you've got to look at all of those. Which is the thing that's causing it? Which one can I treat when? Which will be most effective? Sometimes you'll do, say, a trigger point release, but really you want to be moving the joint, but you will come to that once you can move the tissues, such as the muscle and the nerves. And another time it may be the joint. Okay, I can do a manipulation on the joint, and it will be a lot more, the patient will feel a bit happier about moving. You've shown them that, look, I've just really moved it, made a big loud click. Effectively, they're going to think, oh, it wasn't so bad. I can move. I can do these sort of things. I can suffer. That's where the biopsychosocial meet very nicely, although sometimes people seem to going down the one route or the other. And then you can sort of say, right, now I'm going to give you I'm going to maybe dry needle your trigger points, and they'll feel that they're moving, able to move a little bit more. And now I'm going to give you exercises to take home and use either some of the self-help devices like the back knobble or the jack knobble and all those things that are really, really good.
So is that also a part of your approach of like providing some homework assignments?
Yeah, definitely, most definitely, yeah.
And do you feel that most participate in these requirements to take care of themselves?
They do when it works.
But I'm assuming
the
most
trick is
things
catching them and showing them that something works.
Exactly, because I was going to say usually things take time. Things take time to work.
So, say for example, you've got a back patient, and he comes in and he's scared and he's worried and he doesn't want to move. Now, the psychosocial, there has been a move quite a lot to psychosocial, and we'll just show them exercise. We're just going to show them to do this and that because all the other things don't work, which I don't particularly agree with. I think everything's useful. Mm-hmm. So, in my experience, and I'm not working with highly trained athletes now, showing somebody exercises, they're not going to do them, and more often than not, they do not do them. But if, for example, there's an element of placebo in this as well. If you say you can manipulate a spine and you get this really lovely crack, and then the patient starts to feel that he can move a little bit more, or somebody comes in and gets to a massage therapist. It happens all the time. They massage over all their body, and basically it's hurt them a little bit. Afterwards, they're moving around a lot more and a lot more.
People feel
freely.
great.
They feel great for doing it.
Energized almost. Yeah.
So now they've shown that with these techniques, you are now able to do more than you were able to do half an hour ago before you walked into the clinic. And you now give them something that mimics that or acts like that. I think it's the back knobber, the big S-shaped thing, yeah? I love that thing. I love it because I'm as stiff as a board. And when I want to get to a particular spot, I can reach just about everywhere.
Yeah, me too. Once a year, I have a spot right in the middle of my back that it's the only thing I can use.
Get in there and there it is. And then you just give it a pull.
Or a tennis ball, by the way, on the wall.
Yeah, a tennis ball. But those tools are so useful because then you show somebody how to use it. You show somebody how to use that to help them mobilize a joint or hit a trigger point, then they'll do it. They will use it, and then they'll be willing to either pay the money to buy the thing even and whatever. And they'll come back to you because they trust you to give them the right advice and not try and rip them off, or you'll only get better if you get treatment from me. And you can use those things in different ways. The back knobber is so good because you can use it almost like a mulligan belt to help you do joint movements. If somebody shows you how to do it, you can use it to do the trigger point treatments, and then you can treat them flossing movements, which are very easily done, like slump type movements at home to move the neural tissue, and that can really clear their back up. And once they learn that, they're empowered, and that then feeds into the affective side of it, the psychosocial side of it.
But aren't you like still left here with a delta, because for most things, don't you want the patient to still apply some movement, some strength development, some range of motion development, some stretching? And
that will be part of your home regime and also your clinic regime. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So,
but why don't people like to do
I've got to say, listen, I look at myself. I'm probably the most, if you want to say, average Joe with these sort of things. I hate sport. Mainly because I'm so injured in different places, it hurts. I can't be bothered with it. People keep saying, you need to do sport. I say, no, I don't need to do sport. Whenever I'm at work, you should do sport. If I do sport, I can't move for 3 weeks afterwards. I feel rotten.
But do you do anything on a daily basis?
Yeah, because when I have a certain thing that's causing me a real problem, I don't know if it's the right place to say, I've got fractured ankle in 3 places in a motorcycle accident. I tore my Achilles tendon, tore it, ruptured it. I've got a tear in my left meniscus, medial meniscus, my left knee, a tear in my right
nice
meniscus.
ones.
I've got an ACL tear, complete rupture in my left knee. I had a massive... Unfixed. A massive operation that they cut me from here to here. I've been...
Chest to belly.
Yeah, which is why I've got this big hernia that everyone thinks is just me being fat, which I am anyway. But I've got 3 slip discs, prolapse discs. Every so often, one of those things is going to wake up and play me up. And so I do certain things because I'm a physio and I know what to do. And, okay, I'll take a couple of tablets to calm it down. I'll make sure I move in a particular way, do the exercises I have to do because I might have let that bit get a bit weak. And then eventually it will calm down and I'll move on. And sometimes I will do certain exercises to maintain my stability or my mobility, whichever part I need to do, and I'll do it accordingly. And that's something I found out that works for me. People can see that I'm not the fittest looking individual on the planet. I'm far from it. But I work 14-hour days, home visits, picking patients up, doing things, fairly physical work. I'm in my 60s. I manage. It's something you can teach your patients to do, and they will do it. But sometimes when you say you've got to do this exercise and you're drumming it into them, they kind of go...
People don't like
it. Yeah, they go against
pushes them
it.
away.
If you can give them the little tools here and there, then you can often get something out of it.
Teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you were first introduced to the concept of trigger points?
Yeah, actually, right during university. And
very early in your...
Yeah, but it wasn't a popular thing. And at the time, finding anybody that would talk or teach about it was almost impossible. I actually became self-taught, and then gradually, through being self-taught, found more and more things and managed to find the courses to go on. But in the very beginning, certainly in physiotherapy, it was pretty much frowned on. But then I gradually found it more and more and more through like the osteopathic links. And then I started doing dry needling techniques nearly 30 years ago, and there was a doctor that was teaching that. And I find it really useful.
To young therapists out there that maybe have not come across it or have not invested enough time self-teaching themselves or learning elsewhere, what would you say about trigger points?
Yeah, learn it. Yeah, definitely learn it. It's, like I said, it was one of those things that I remember there was one teacher that was supposedly meant to know a little bit about it, and I asked him about it, and he said, no, I know a little bit about it, but nothing to teach you. And gradually I picked it up. I find it a very, very useful technique. Once I learned the dry needling of it, I very rarely used electrotherapy. I tend to, if I use electrotherapy, it might be to calm down some inflamed joints. But say for back problems, I more often than not will use dry needling techniques.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have you stick some needles in me.
I don't know if it's lucky, but it works. And it works if you know what you're doing. And certainly in the clinic I'm working in now, there's a lot of younger physios have just left university, and trigger point dry needling or trigger point treatment has become a lot more acceptable, so people go on with it. There's still people that will poo-poo it because some of the research in it needs to be better, but there needs to be better in everything. But it's definitely, I would highly recommend it.
And dry needling, when did that come in?
For me?
Yeah.
About a year after I left university.
So also early on.
I started my quest in trying to figure out about trigger points and things like that. Probably for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to stick needles in people. I don't know. I did the course and I realised
it's obviously something compelling and interesting about it. And the tie to, do you think the tie to Eastern acupuncture has an effect?
Well, I had the absolute privilege of working with an osteopath who was for some reason working in the National Health Service. Something weird happened. Someone was working in my department. He was an osteopath and an acupuncturist. So when I learned the dry needling and we got on very well, he took me under his wing and started showing me these little tricks with some of them. Then I did some of the Eastern acupuncture, but not to be an acupuncturist because I don't want to work in that field. But I learnt it and I found it very, very useful, and then I started teaching it as well. But
would you someone who's investing the time to learn dry needling, would you recommend they also not to get certified, but at least to understand some
definitely.
elements of
The Eastern, yeah, definitely. That's what I did. Once I learned, as I was learning, they would say, "Oh, this is on the meridians, or this works." And I'm trying not to hit this microphone, which I keep doing. This works in a particular way on the meridian, so you need to be aware of that. And so I got books on the Eastern approach, but I didn't learn all the pulses and the things like that, how it works. I don't poo-poo them in any way. I just didn't learn them, but I knew about them. I understood they were there. We've got time, but there's a very good picture, and there was a guy called Jeremy Lewis who once did a workshop, and he had a picture of a guy lying on a bed, and it was a picture of this guy pushing on somebody's back, and then he said, "What are they doing?" So all the sort of physiotherapists that were sort of Maitland trained were saying, "Oh, he's doing a Maitland unilateral posterior to anterior mobilization." And then he said, "Yeah, but if you're in America, that would be somebody releasing a trigger point in the erector spinae." And I said, "If you're in China, that would be somebody treating with shiatsu the bladder meridian." So it changes, but there's a lot of different things. And an adjunct to that, when I did my master's, and he was also my electro teacher during my BSc, a guy called Tim Watson, and he put this picture up of he said, "This is a tissue battery. There's such a thing as a tissue battery." And he would say that if you hurt yourself, how does the body know to heal? And everyone would say, "Oh, you get these chemicals released from the..." Yeah, but how? How does it know to release them? It was like, how did the Big Bang happen or not happen? And it was like, basically, if you get a cut in your arm, how does the body know to heal? Yes, there is a cascade of events, but how? It's basically a plus and a minus. They're not meeting. So you get a break in the electrical current, and the body then knows to try and produce the chemicals to heal that. And there's actually developed a tissue battery, and when you look at it, it's very similar to the meridians that are in Eastern Chinese medicine. So yeah, you should go and learn about it, because there's a lot to be said from it. They have their other other ways of approaching it and looking at it, which is nothing wrong with that. But it's worth knowing about it. And if you're going to do, especially you're going to be doing trigger points and needling, because some of them are meridian points, and you might be sticking a needle in a place you really don't want to be sticking it in a person that really doesn't need it there, like a pregnant woman or something like that. So yes, you should go and learn. I then went on and did a course with another guy who then did a good few weeks of teaching us, but just teaching us some of the very basic things to look out for when we were doing our trigger point treatment. So yes, I would suggest it, or if you can do both, even better. But sometimes it gets a bit confusing when you're trying to sort of merge the two schools of thought together. It can be a bit of a problem, but certainly you need to be open to it. I like to think I am open to it, and I certainly will use it.
Yeah. Paul Townley, a pleasure to have you here again. As mentioned, officially the first guest to appear twice on the Treatment Room Secrets podcast, and hopefully not the last time. So I know we have a lot to speak about. Hopefully Chelsea still have a large portion of the season to play, so hopefully they do better and we can talk about them in a positive light. And of Graham Potter, hopefully he does well as well. And
I personally think Hermione might do better.
Yeah. Everyone, you know where to find Paul Townley, his courses, the online content. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Thanks very much.
If you found this video useful and want to see more like this, make sure you subscribe below and don't forget to hit the notification bell.